The following is a presentation of the Force Center podcast feed.
Hello, Force Center friends. Welcome to the second episode of Indiana Jones and the Perilous Podcasts. This is kind of a other center presentation from us here at Force Center. That's a long sentence and intro. I'm Ken Hampson.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk Indiana Jones.
That is right. This has been a lot of fun, and this is only the second episode. The first one was so much fun, an overall look at Indiana Jones, the character, the films, the franchise, the future, the past, all of it, and what it means to us. This is all made possible by you on Patreon, though after Dial of Destiny, the entire world will get to hear these podcasts, so you might be listening to that. And under those circumstances, we are going to be focusing today, Joseph, on, the film, capital T, capital F, that kind of capital F that got this whole thing started. It is Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, though having, you and I competed at some high-level trivia over the last couple of years, that was often a debate. What is the actual title of the movie? Now, what was it then? Indiana Jones and or just the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's our first discussion point. But anyways, Joseph, let's look at this wonderful film.
Well, we can dig through history to find the truth. That is the true value of artifacts, right? Isn't it knowledge? And we can put on our leather jackets and get our whips and get our friends and look on Wikipedia and find out the answer to this question. That it was Raiders of the Lost Ark for an extremely long time. Before a lot of the rebranding to have it. So if you were alive and about in 1981 and you went to the movie theater and you listened to Siskel and Ebert, this was Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And just our whole lives, and I know we're not alone in this, our whole lives just saying Raiders. That's all you needed to know.
Yeah. And I have, isn't there a football team called Raiders?
There is, the Las Vegas Raiders now. Yeah. But
yes, I've had lots of experiences in my life where my ears perk up because somebody's talking about Raiders, and I'm like, "Ooh, like Indiana." Oh no, football. Okay, fair enough. All the respect.
Yeah, all the respect. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think their logo should just be Indy, just on the side of their helmets. They have a pirate now, maybe just Indy.
Yeah, I do love that these two films, obviously, this is not Raiders of the Lost Ark is not just George Lucas's film, but intimately tied to him. He has the original idea, intimately tied to Star Wars. I love that if you want to be pedantic, you need to use both titles for Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but of course, originally Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the same thing with, A New Hope. I know it wasn't A New Hope when it was released. They both invite that pedantic self-correction to make sure that no one corrects you about the title.
Yeah, generational change in the titles alone.
Exactly. Well, Ken, let's dive into discussing this film. I'm sure we'll both have lots to say. This is, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Later, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I got it right in my notes. Released in June of 1981. 1 hour and 55 minutes of action, comedy, romance, mayhem, and thought. Story by George Lucas and Philip Kaufman is the credit. Screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan. Directed by, Steven Spielberg. We always like to talk when we're discussing the new Star Wars films that are coming out, the kind of prep that we did to watch the episode. We do that with our Star Wars reviews, partially to just really remind ourselves and all of our listeners that we're watching as fans, as well as putting on the analysis hat. This was kind of a different process to sit down and watch this because I think this is such a film that lives in culture. So many famous lines, famous moments, famous scenes. It's a film that's lived in both of our lives for years and years. What was it like for you? What prep did you do to sit down and watch this as both a fan and putting on your dusty, beat up old analysis hat?
It was an interesting experience, and I, had making my notes and stuff, and have a little bit of the format of what we might be talking about. And I was like, I'm not really prepping for this. I'm just putting on Raiders. But then I realized now I got to watch it in a way that I haven't really watched it before. And that was a kind of fun and exciting and a bit of a challenge, right? Like these scenes that I've lived with my entire life. This is clearly one of my favorite films. So it's like, yeah, I know the scene, but to go like, well, no, let me pull back and then diving in. You and I were talking off air, and we'll probably mention this again. There's surprisingly less about the making of these movies. There's stuff out there. There's books. There's all those kind of things out there. Yes, but if you look over at Star Wars, it's a little different feel, right? Where every little corner has a dock, which I want more, right? Give me 2 docks when there's only one on Star Wars. I feel there still needs to be the quintessential 6-part series on Indiana Jones. I don't know. Maybe we'll get it one day. So I was diving into it like I haven't before in terms of like themes and people's thoughts on the films, and some of it really insightful. Some of it I thought slightly, well, yes, but unfair for the movie. Like there's barbs tossed at it. A lot of it's about the time. We're going to talk about some things that work, but still are of its time. That will come a little bit later in our discussion. But it was overall short answer to your question. It was a fun challenge to see Indy in a new light.
Yeah. Did you sit down did you pick a specific time? Did you watch it like a movie night? Did you watch it on your computer, subtitles up, notepad in hand? That's also historic. We don't actually have physical notepads anymore when we watch movies. At least I don't. But what was it like? Was it really like dim the lights, popcorn movie night, or was it more like I'm going to pause, I'm going to write down notes?
It was an assignment. Yeah, that sounds real drab, doesn't it? An assignment. No, I sat down with the laptop open and paused every now and then, paused to make sure I got some names right. That's the thing too. I've known all these names, known a lot of the actors who play them, but again, it's not Star Wars. I haven't been in an Indiana Jones trivia match, and it's weird. It's like I think I know that name. Oh yeah, let me look it up. So it was a lot of that. I wish though I did have the MacBook open. I wish I have like those little books that Indy has with the, you can make your notes in it in the field, little field notebooks. I should just pulled one of those out, all crinkly and dirty, pull a little band off the books and open it up. That would have been fun.
Well, now I have an assignment before we an assignment of capitalism before we do our Temple of Doom review. I got to get my little notebook. Yeah, I had such an interesting mix of watching it like it's a movie night. My intent was to I just want to watch it. I just want to let it wash over me, and then I'll make notes or I'll pause it if I need to. My wife was working late on a Thursday afternoon, and Thursday afternoon into evening, I poured myself a little whiskey. And I couldn't stop myself. I got so involved in the ideas of it and wanting to rewind and write down and compare and contrast that I ended up watching it over, a 4-hour period, this 2-hour film. And that was really, really, it ended up being really, really fun. But it made me feel like, man, I wish I had time to just watch it again and let it wash over me. I also had a couple of other sort of adjacent experiences to watching it for this discussion. I got a new Blu-ray box set that actually has, I believe, the special features from a DVD box set I used to have that came out in 2008 in support of that new film of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And that does have a decent amount of behind the scenes. It's got an hour-long documentary about Raiders, which some of it is this stuff that has passed into legend about Lucas and Spielberg at the beach, hiding from the potential pain of Star Wars numbers. And I want to do James Bond. I got something better, all that kind of stuff. But it reminds you of Spielberg's place at the time that he was a little bit of a bad bet, because 1941 had been a flop, and that a lot of his films had been over time and over budget, and that injected this Indiana Jones spirit to it of like, we just got to make this work. We got to do it fast. Can't be over budget. Some of that, those ideas are present there. I didn't dig through all of the special features, but they have special features on the sound effects, the fight choreography, a lot breaking that down. I think that's a valuable set. I was lucky to see that Ben Burt talk at the Academy Museum. I mentioned on our main podcast recently. There was just a little feature. He featured Indiana Jones a little bit, in particular talking about the whip and wanting to make the whip heightened That the whole movie was larger than life and wanting the sounds larger than life, and that it wasn't just the crack, that he went and recorded jet fighters to make the whoosh of the whip
Wow.
absurdly out of this world powerful, particularly
yeah.
when he first lashes out and gets the gun dropped. That's the sound of a jet engine. So I did get kind of seeped into a little bit of the behind the scenes lore, and I think that only made me appreciate the film more.
I'd never heard that about the whip sound, even if that was in that anything in that doc has been so. I think 2008, the last time I watched anything, but to hear Ben Burtt talk about that's fantastic. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really great to hear. To me, it really underlined and echoed a lot of my feelings about the love that went into making this film. To have that understanding of this, there's a lot going on in this film, and there is emotional realism, but it is meant to be heightened, a heightened reality where supernatural things are real, and that they were so into that in the sound effects of like, this can't just be a punch. This has to be borderline comic, how powerful a punch sounds. And often movies do that. I think it's always a horrible shock the first time you actually hear somebody be punched and like, oh, that's real. That's horrible. As opposed to that, of movies. But the determination, even from the sound perspective, to enjoy a heightened world was really the joy of it. The excitement about it was infectious. And I think that translates into viewing the film.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The pow, zoom, pow, Batman punch of it all in a weird way. Because I when watching Raiders, and this is maybe some overall stuff too, but like watching Raiders last night, it's in a weird way the most real of the films, right? It's presented a little more realistic than some of the other ones to me, but then that thought is almost taken away from me the moment that first whip sound comes out. And that makes perfect sense. What you're saying, what Ben Burtt did, it all kind of translates, and it reminds me that no, this is high adventure. This is high adventure.
High adventure, yeah. Final thing I wanted to say about my prep is often with Star Wars, when we're watching things, I'll post a picture, particularly the Midnight Experience for Disney Plus, of a drink and an action figure. And I really want some of these new action figures they've put out, the higher end, nice 6-inch ones, whatever they are, basically the Black Series of Indiana Jones, but then also the retro ones. And recently, when we were in London, I went to the Forbidden Planet Megastore, and they just had everything. I was a kid in a candy store. I couldn't get everything. I physically didn't have room, but they had all the Indiana Jones figures. And I picked up an Indiana Jones figure and decided, no, I'll find him later. It was like the film. Like, I had him in my hand, Marcus. I had Indy in my hand. He could have watched this movie with me, but I had to put him down. I didn't notice that Marion comes with a monkey. They had the German mechanic. A father and a son walked by and looked at him while I was looking at him. And at first the father was like, wow, look at all these. And then he picked up the action figure of Toad and went, Toad? Who wants him? So
fair question, but I want him.
I want him all. So it was, we'll get into the themes, but this whole idea of what has value and when does the value accrue, but looking at those retro figures that are recreations of artifacts from the past and coveting them now, that got me in the mood too.
That's fantastic. I do have a Raiders figure. I got it sent to me for my birthday from a good friend, Jeff Saunders, a listener of Force and everything. And so I have that Kenner 3 3/4 one hanging in my room now. It's great. It's just bold and yellow and red and adventure-y, and it's hanging there.
The classic, the Raiders Indy with leather jacket, hat, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I had him in my hand, Ken. I had him in my hand.
I don't want to rub it in, but you only had so much room in the satchel. So
Yep. All right. We are going to move on from my toy woes to talking about this film. So where does this film rate for you? We're not into necessarily ranking this one, is objectively the best kind of thing. But is this the best for you? Is it your favorite? In your opinion, is it the most well-made of the films? We often hear that about Raiders, so I'm curious where you land on that.
This is taking me back to my mid-'90s college days of film and video production, in screenwriting classes where we would just sit around and talk about the stuff with too much snark and at times too much sincerity in our own, just in terms of their own beliefs. So I'll say that I am one of those annoying people that consider this the best of the series, a perfect film, but Last Crusade's my favorite. And that's kind of, I wish I was more original than that, but that's
No, I'm with you. I think, and I feel this way about some of the Star Wars films of like, yep, I think that's probably, in my opinion, the best made. You could go sort of down the analytical rabbit hole of the way it's constructed, the cinematography, all those things. But then there's but I'm a little bit more drawn to this one, or I want to rewatch this one on a Saturday afternoon. And I feel like Raiders of the Lost Ark is, in my opinion, with those kind of analysis, probably the best made. I think it, almost like the original Star Wars film, Now A New Hope, it is the freshest. It's lightning in a bottle. Yes. It isn't the entirety of what the series can be or will be, but you can feel that excitement, that discovery, that freshness, even 40 plus years later. So I think it has the bonus of being the first one. And then I think it also has that, it is just so constructed so well. I think you can feel from the creators, the fun, the discovery. I will probably talk about this a little bit more, but I wanted to put it out here. I feel like the film is wrestling with archaeology. What is its value? It's about people digging through the past to unearth golden treasure. And I think you can feel the spirit of that's what Lucas, Spielberg, and a bunch of the other creative team are doing to their own childhoods. They are rediscovering the relic of adventure serials and bringing them into the present, making them new, holding them up and going. They do have inherent value. Yeah. And I think that act, the freshness of that act, you can feel. And then as Indiana Jones moves forward, I think there is a sense of, well, now we have established a language. We have established a world, a character, and now we're iterating on that. I know I don't always agree with that when people say it about Star Wars, that Star Wars is now just, that Star Wars used to be looking back on other ideas, and now Star Wars is just looking back on Star Wars. I don't entirely agree with that when people say it about Star Wars, but I do think there is some of that spirit here of this is a rediscovery, this is a creation, and then there is a slightly different tone and feel as they're building on what they created. And Dial of Destiny is going to be fascinating because it's going to be looking back on the legacy of what was created.
Yeah, no, I think, this film, and watching it with this little extra eye, so to speak, eye of the Forbidden Temple, I guess. Yes, the serial adventures came before it, and that's very clearly part of the pedigree. But I didn't see this one in 81, right? I saw Temple first. So I didn't experience this. I definitely was too young. But like I can, just like Star Wars and a Star Destroyer flying over your head. Can you imagine sitting in a theater and either being transported back to your childhood with this kind of stuff or seeing a lot of the set pieces for the first time? And it's definitely different in Temple and Last Crusade and on. It's going to be different because this is, like you said, there's a little bonus for being first. That the joy it dug up in your heart like an archaeology. It had to have been palpable. The only thing I can kind of remember that's similar is I didn't see Back to the Future opening weekend, but my mom and aunt did, and they came home and were raving. I remember it, just raving about this film and the joy of seeing it, the joy of experiencing another thing that's considered like a perfect film, just in terms of what it does and how it's set up and how it's written. And I think I got a lot of joy out of kind of watching it through those eyes to what you're saying here. It's the energy, the trying to make it work behind the scenes, the smaller budget, quicker shoot day, all those kind of things. Therefore, it comes off as at times a little bit more, like I said, real to me versus some of the other stuff is bigger. Last Crusade's so much bigger of a film because it was, 10 years later. So it definitely works for me. And it's such a template setter for franchise and for other movies. It still is. The other films in the franchise have incredible high points, but perhaps maybe lower low points than this one in terms of execution or what's on the screen. and I think that's why this is in that perfect kind of a film conversation, which, you know, is anything truly perfect? No, but it all works for me, and it's all just such a joy. It's a whip snap and a whip smart film.
It really is, and I can't wait to discuss all the other films because I'm just so fascinated by Temple of Doom, partially because it is so dark and so pulpy, but it is fractured. And then, like I said, Last Crusade is even bigger, and I think in some ways dealing with some of the ideas that they started in Raiders, and even sharpening the point. Thematically, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is its whole own thing we'll talk about, and can't wait to talk about Dial of Destiny. So they're all worthy and interesting, but I think part of the magic of Raiders is that bonus of being first, creating a list of this is what makes an Indiana Jones picture. We pulled from things we love, but now we've defined this is what makes an Indiana Jones picture, and now we're trying to sort of make sure that we have all the ingredients. I think a huge thing about this is that it is a perfect mixture of the ingredients. It's just a flawless balance of the action, the comedy, the romance, the villainy, the globe-trotting, just the pure charm. Lawrence Kasdan's script, Karen Allen's performance, along with Harrison Ford's performance, just emanating, radiating, glowing charm. A ridiculous number of iconic quotes from this same film. Then you have the mystery, the awe, the supernatural, and actual ideas about treasure, about morality. It has so many ingredients, and they're so perfectly balanced. And I think it also has a thing to me that's really important, and it's a part of why I love Star Wars, why we talk about Star Wars. The fun, the thrill, the pace, the action sequence, the tension sequences, isn't that just cool? Isn't it fun to dabble in the supernatural? All that stuff isn't. Sometimes you hear that stuff described as like, well, you got to put in those flashy things to keep the audience's attention. And that's not what's going on here. The fun in the thrill is the point just as much as the ideas.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And talking about this perfect mix, the sequence when we meet Marion and Nepal in her bar, all the way to the end where the bar burns and I'm your goddamn partner. That whole sequence is just, you watch it and it's everything you're talking about. It's the themes, it's the stakes, it's the pain that they both are dealing with, it's the adventure, it's the humor. Whiskey, one of my favorite lines ever. Her taking the drink is the shot. That's to me that's Indiana Jones. Like if I was to show someone, hey, here's 8 minutes of what this is. You've just arrived here on Mars from Mars. We're going to show you what it is. And it's all everything you're talking about. It's not forced. It's not stressed. You mentioned tension. There's such great tension throughout this film, perhaps the best in the series, and some of the best tension in cinema, I think, where it just so even marrying with a knife, covering it with her clothes is like just the tension. Every scene has this, it's about to explode into something that can't be controlled. But that sequence is everything you're talking about to me. It's video evidence of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's really well said, and everything is in there too. The villainy of Tote, and the just power of I'm your goddamn partner, and the way it's shot, thrusting that the object, the MacGuffin for now, the MacGuffin that leads to the bigger MacGuffin in his face. It's so powerful, and you're right about. I think one of the things that does make the film really great is it is layered everywhere with tension and conflict, even down to those little details. The thing that I'd never really paid attention to is what a great and small choice it is in the beginning sequence when Indy is running for the plane and screaming for it, and the pilot is fishing, and for just a second kind of doesn't want to stop fishing. It's an incredibly small moment, but it would have been so easy and straightforward to just have the pilot hear that, head up, give it agency or urgency by him rushing up. But the conflict of like, yeah, but I had one on the line. Do I really want to save your life?
Jock. Yeah. So
Yeah.
good. Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, we'll get to our discussion. We'll get to the deeper side. I constantly laugh through these films, and I think that is not forgotten, but it can't be forgotten when you're discussing them.
No, it cannot. So, as we always do, we're going to discuss the action and the comedy. There's so much action and comedy to be discussed. But we want to dive in, like we always do, on Force Center here on Other Center in this Indiana Jones podcast, into the big ideas. What is actually at work during all that comedy and action and charm? What is the film wrestling with? We were talking about a sense of conflict and tension throughout. There is every little moment from Jacques to dining with whiskey and knives, booze and knives. There's tension everywhere. But what are the big themes? What ideas are at stake in the movies? What overall tensions really make this film move forward? Ken, what are your thoughts? What notes did you jot down?
Yeah, I'll admit this. I had a lot of notes, and at one point I did just stop because I was watching the film again, and I remind myself to go back to the notes. Here's where I start. And this is digging into a little bit of what was available online, just little clips and stuff I was reading last night. George Lucas saw him as a role model, though flawed, and wanted him to be relatable. And there was an original design of the character to be a little bit, I'll say, James Bondian, which we know, part of the lore, right? Spielberg says, I'd like to do Bond, and Lucas says, I got one better for you. But they wanted to be a little bit more of a playboy. His work funds his life. And George really wanted this idea of a role model. It's very, very George, right? So because of that, this one of those big themes, and maybe it's throughout the series, but definitely in this film that we're talking about, there's this adventure in the name of good. This is an homage to the great adventure stories in cinema. But I do like that there's definitely a tension, and there's you and I discussed last time out. There's a real world discussion, especially now, about what are you doing? What's your purpose? For being an archaeologist. And there's a quote from Kasdan of saying he felt Indiana Jones was reduced to being like a grave robber type, and that something had put him there. But this adventure in the name of good, I think Indy doesn't seek out adventure. Even Harrison himself says, I played it as a professor first, archaeologist, adventurer second. So it's knowledge and truth is his priority, and everything. Because he's not perfect at it. He might think he is, but he doesn't make it up as he goes along. But he's flawed. He can't necessarily throw the best punch. He's in over his head. But the adventure is for a good cause and reason. It's always at the core of what's going on with Indiana Jones. Even, and I think, again, you could debate a film made in the late 70s, released in 81. Even in the opening sequence, what exactly is his goal there? Is he taking from this the spot that he shouldn't be taking in Peru? Should Indy be even grabbing that fertility idol? Or is he trying to get it because Belloc's going to get it regardless, and he's trying to save it from him? What's his true purpose? Some of it is just because the movie was made in a certain time, and maybe those questions aren't asked of Indiana Jones then as they are now. But also then you have to go to the core of what Indy's there for. And again, I say it's adventure in the name of good.
No, I really love this. We talked a lot about these big ideas in that first podcast, but I think we're going to talk about them even more because now we get into, well, how does the film actually deal with them? We can talk about what did the creators intend versus, well, the text exists now, and we get to analyze it, and we get to analyze what it means, regardless of what the creators may or may not have intended. That there are different schools of thought and different schools of analysis about how you analyze something. What's the intent versus, well, maybe the creators did or did not intend this, but how do we read the text now, particularly as it moves farther and farther into the future with time? But I really agree with you. I love the picture of Indiana Jones as books and swagger. We spend most of the time with him in swagger mode, but we also get to see him in tweed and glasses and nerding out in the library, basically, and wanting to impart knowledge. That's his day job. And I was really, when we were talking in our first episode, I was really excited to that's what I feel about Indiana Jones. And I agree with you of adventure for good. I was really excited to analyze the films for how much is he enjoying this? How much does he want this? How much hints at this is the story of somebody who believes that they are all books
Mm-hmm.
and tweed and knowledge, but secretly long for manly adventures, coded as traditionally manly adventures of romance and punching. And it was really great to see in this film. And we'll talk about it more, but moments where he's enjoying the romance and the adventure, but to me, always a sense of, I'm putting on this hat and this leather jacket, not just because I need a weekend off to blow off steam because society makes me feel trapped. I don't get that vibe at all. I get that I need the thing at the end of the line, and it is not the journey for him. It is the object at the end of the journey. And so he puts himself through the hell of the journey. So I really agree with that. But I think you're really tapping into something big that for me feels like the main thrust of the film is that Raiders of the Lost Ark feels like in the times where it is digging into who he is, why does he do this, what animates his choices, that this is his road to becoming an adventurer for good. I think this is the temptation of Indiana Jones. I think Last Crusade goes on to put a really fine point on it, to the point of having his obsessive father who passed this to him saying, let it go. You know, in Indy's explicit in Last Crusade, right? Of his crusade is for his father, not for the cup. He's never about the cup explicitly from the beginning. And I think Raiders is dealing with some of those same ideas, but almost in a murkier, even slightly darker way. It's earlier in Indy's life. But I feel like structurally, we're invited to look at Indy's past, his choices, how he values archaeology. We're invited to go, do we agree with him? Is he a good man? Is he the role model that Lucas wants him to be? And pointedly, we're invited to contrast him with Renee Belloc. We're invited to do that from the first scene, but then I love it. But Renee's monologue has zero subtlety. He is practically looking at the camera and going, compare and contrast who we are as humans and how that is exemplified through our views of the value of archaeology. It really sets up an invitation to go watch the film, enjoy the charm, enjoy the humor, enjoy the adventure, but look at this journey of what is Indy's morality versus Belloc's.
I love that you did this, the first temptation of Indy. We can call it that. Jumping a little bit to the end, but the bazooka scene at the end, I was reading up on that too. Of just there's some people interpret it of, well, we'll see. Indy is just as bad as him. He doesn't blow it up. He wants to see, and it's like I see it as he's still wrestling to that point. He's still like, oh, but I do want to see it, right? I do. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, it's a piece of it's a calling of his bluff that ties back to the conversation in the bar. The I'm a shadow reflection of you scene. And that, we do see Indy wrestle with it. I think that's a wonderful point.
Yeah. I mean, and I definitely want to talk the real fine point of exactly how Indy and Belloc speak about and treat artifacts, their value. And in that final speech in particular, or not final, that the speech that Belloc gives about that choice, he says a lot of not great things to try to manipulate Indy. He says, all your life has been spent in pursuit of archaeological relics. Inside the Ark are treasures beyond your wildest aspirations. You want to see it opened as well as I. Indiana, we are simply passing through the history. This is history. It's the last line that gets Indy, in my opinion. It isn't the greed. It isn't the power that can be bestowed. It isn't you're so curious and you need to know what's in there. It's the inherent valuing of an object, of being history, of carrying knowledge and inherent importance. And I think that's one of the big ways that Indy and Belloc get contrasted, is all of their views on why are they doing this? Why are they doing archaeology? What is the value of objects?
Yeah, no, I think that's a big, giant, well said moment there, and all leading to that choice for Indy in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I want to talk about that because it's one of my favorite things about
Mm.
the contrast of the value, of the way they value things. Um, Bellick is pretty consistently valuing artifacts as not inherently valuable, but
Mhm.
having some value that they can bring to him. I love his watch quote that I've always
Mhm.
liked, but watching it this time, it really resonated with me. He shows that the watch to Indy and says it's worthless, $10 from a vendor in the street, but I take it, I bury it in the sand for 1,000 years, it becomes priceless, like the Ark. Men will kill for it. Men like you and me. And
Mm.
I think there's some amount of, good compare and contrast with Indy there where, yeah, old things have value because they are of their time,
Mm.
but there's such disrespect
Yeah.
to the watch, right? To the object of, well, maybe the value is its
Mm.
craftsmanship. Maybe the value is the memory of when you purchased it.
Mhm.
Maybe it has all sorts of different kinds of inherent value. Uh, and the way that he can just sort of look at it in a sneering way and say, only if you add this other ingredient of time will it have any value, is a great starting point of Bellocs, uh, not valuing the object for what they mean, but rather than what they can bring him. To him, the watch is worthless. It might
Yeah.
not be to some kid in the street. Probably find that real valuable.
Yeah.
He explicitly wants the Ark because of the power he thinks it can bestow on him. Do you
Yeah.
realize what the Ark is? It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God, and it's within my reach. Which is, a great over-the-top villain line, but also really fun to think about. Like, what exactly do you have to say to God, Belloc?
Yeah, yeah. He's not stopping to ask himself why. He's just, we have the ability to do it. Yeah, no, I love this. It's the pursuit of glory, and is throughout all these films, like how you relate to that, right? And Bella versus Indy is the main thing about that there. But there's the imagery all the way through it. Satipo's this is Alfred Molina's character doing the money grubbing figure sign before his death. Marion holding on to the medallion, which represents her father, represents family, it represents something bigger, versus literally a shot with her looking at the money that she's just received to kind of give this over. Yeah, it's constantly at play, and I think you're right. A lot of the Belloc stuff is just right there. It's just right there for you to take in.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying too about it's a disregard for the watch, this poor watch that you and I are defending, but it's disregard for the now, right? For who might relate to this now, who might want that idol to be there, who might want it to be kept in one spot. It's a disregard for all of it as it relates to you, and when it can become valuable to you.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about Marion's connection of, like, yeah, why does she wear that around her neck? Is it because it's valuable? Is it because that's the safest place, maybe on a practical level? But yeah, is that her dead father next to her heart is really powerful. I think there's some great, very traditional ideas that you find in a lot of morality based storytelling, but certainly connections to Star Wars here about greed, and it's never enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Belloc is, he's nodding along with the tenets of the Sith, because he's not even happy with the Ark itself, right? You could think that the Ark is this golden object of history lost for thousands and thousands of years. But he's not even happy with the Ark itself. He says inside the Ark are treasures beyond your wildest aspirations. And it's like a joke on him when there's only sand inside it. So even the thing that he's coveting, that's literally golden, literally ancient, literally imbued with power and history, is still not enough. He still wants what he thinks is inside the shattered remains of the tablets. Everything about him is how the objects can give him power. There's the famous great line of, again, we see there's nothing you can possess which I cannot take away. That combined with his sort of staring at it, the maniacal laughter, like the idol, that owning him, holding the idol, him owning it, not bringing it somewhere else, not studying it, but him obtaining it is the power, is the value. His creepy interest in Marion is just some very standard, even trope like the bad guy and the good guy fighting over the girl. Definitely some dated elements to that, even though Marion is a great and powerful character. But I feel like that is a part of the story. His creepy interest in Marion reads as, I take that idol from you, I'll take this girl from you. The value of things is the challenge for me to take them from someone else and to have them to prove to me that I am the most powerful.
Yeah, and I love that. Hopefully I'm not jumping around too much, but on that one scene, there's Karen Allen brought a lot to that scene in the sense of it was originally when I say originally, who knows, various drafts of the scripts, but it was a little bit more of a mutual attraction between them. And she just said that doesn't read right to me. It's not honest. She's loyal to Indy in a lot of different ways, not just necessarily romantic. So she wanted to play more of the, a seduction to escape, a trap, a contest. And so that's just, to me, adds to what you're saying about Belloc, that there's nothing there for him other than just to take her as a trophy.
Yep. And he says at one point, the girl was mine to the Nazis. There's this literal, desire to possess. And that documentary that, again, I believe is from 2008, Karen Allen is talking about that scene and recollecting that they had her putting on the dress, and she said to Spielberg, like, there's no reason that I can't find any motivation for her to go along with that. And Spielberg, at least in Karen Allen's story, being tired, exhausted, trying to get this done in 73 days for the sake of his career, said, you got anything, Karen? and that she says she came up with the knife thing. Like, let's make it all about, I'll play this game to distract you to escape.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Because it makes it, gives her agency and gives the scene great tension that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Amazing tension. Yeah.
So a lot of talk about Belloc seeing things is not necessarily having inherent value or value attached to sentiment, like you're talking about with the top of the staff and Marion's father, but rather just, can I possess them? Can I take them away from someone else? Can they lead to more and more power for me? And I think part of the sort of temptation of Indiana Jones is that he is tempted throughout the film to treat objects like that. I think whether or not it was intended by the creators, I think you can read the beginning as raiding. There's still an active culture in that area of South America, as the film says, but Peru, I think it gets fleshed out in other materials, that there's still active cultures there. We're like, don't take that. The culture who built that place set up death traps, not for fun. There's not a hidden camera for a reality television show. It's because don't take that. So I think if you want to, you can read that as a rating. Indy's heart, you can read Indy's heart is in the right place of that is a piece of history. It is not actively being used. Perhaps the original culture that used it as an active idol of fertility is no longer there. We can learn more about an ancient culture. You can read some good intentions, but I think you can read him as a raider of that idol. He keeps kind of going back in forth in how, in wrestling with his own darkness. I want to talk a little bit more about how Indy's darkness is coded. But there's all these great scenes where you can say, is he making a pragmatic choice, or is he prioritizing the Ark over Marion? Is like when he leaves her tied up, you could just go like that. It's a fun comedy moment. There's charm to it, and it's pragmatic. He's right. She would, if he pulled her out, they would know. But there's a sort of a level of obsession, about the Ark that I think he eventually breaks free from. There's a lot in the film that is coded of what becomes, again, explicit in Last Crusade. Is this about the cup, or is this about your father? I think in a slightly murkier way, Marion versus the Ark juxtaposition. We can talk about this more, but I think there's a question of is she hurt because back in the day, 10 years ago, he left her for an adventure, for an artifact? That moment of leaving her tied up. He claims in that climactic moment with the bazooka that he just wants to save her, but he's still not able to destroy the Ark. All of that sort of being capped by him still sort of obsessing on the Ark and its future in that final scene, and Marion saying, well, I know what I've got here, and inviting audiences to read the film as well. Here's the real treasure. They came back together, and that's what matters. So I think the way that Indy interacts with the Ark, he's in danger of becoming as obsessive as Belloc. But I think at the end of the day, he becomes what you're talking about, this adventurer for good, where he has, in his heart of hearts, he has respect for the inherent value, the inherent power of objects. I think Indy, like I said, I think Indy can't bring himself to destroy the Ark because of the last thing Belloc says. I don't think it's about his greed. It's about, it is history. Like, what knowledge will be lost? What understanding of humanity will be lost if he makes this choice? And it's even there when he, in his anger at the end, that the government won't respect it. You know, fools, they don't know what they've got there. He has, throughout the film, I think, plenty moments of thrill, of enjoying the violence and romance, but that is not what he's after. You know, at the end of the day, he does all of this so he can come back home, put on glasses and tweed, and share his knowledge.
Yeah. No, this is wonderful stuff here. When I go back to the beginning of it there too, where I think this is also a story about folklore and the power of myth, and what Indy's relationship to that is, and something he struggles with. And Indy's to be relatable, but he's to be portrayed as fallible as well. I like your read on the opening scene. I think it definitely is adventure, right? It's definitely a great opening sequence. It's a great intro to the character. But yeah, I think you take what he was doing there, and again, I think that you could argue to a degree, well, Belloc's going for it, so he better go for it too. But again, I go to Capston's quote of Indy's kind of at this point reduced to this idea of grave robbing. He wasn't necessarily speaking about this scene. So yeah, you take it on face value, it's a fun adventure, but you're right. The locals put some traps up there, not for fun, not for fun. That makes me laugh so hard because you can so view it as that. It's a fun ride. Well, no, they don't want you there.
Really violent escape room. Yeah.
It's just fun. No, to where he ends up. And I think he ends up in a better spot, but it's still complicated spot, and Temple of Doom takes place before, so throw that out maybe on the Ark. We can put that on a different story timeline for Indy, but go to Last Crusade, and he's still struggling with it, right? Still pursuing these things, but maybe with a little bit more refined sense of good. And then the final lesson being his father. Then we get to Crystal Skull after. But yeah. So I really love what you're saying in the journey, and I think you're right. In the Marion moment, it's a good strategy. It might be for the benefit of them all, but I think that's what flashes through his head is that if I do this, the Ark is lost to us and maybe goes to them and all that kind of stuff. And again, maybe you could argue, well, he's trying to keep it out of the Nazis' hands. Sure, that's part of it, but I don't think it's played that way. So I think it's the value of this story, the value of the journey of Indy, and that it is not necessarily about what his actions, that dumb trope of, Indy doesn't affect the plot of the movie. Something I've always just it's not the gotcha you think it is, number one, because it takes away the value of this ongoing journey of this man. It's complicated, man.
I just this morning watched Alex Damon of Star Wars Explains a great video about this, and the argument of, if you want to get into the plot, he does affect the plot, but also the more important thing of that isn't the heart of the movie. It's the question raised by the title. If this is Raiders of the Lost Ark, is Indy one of the Raiders? I think you said something that made me feel like I could crystallize that moment with the bazooka a little bit more. From Belloc's perspective, everything's a competition, and possessing the Ark is a win for him. And he thinks the argument he's making to Indy is a selfish one of, you can't bear to lose the Ark. But I think what actually does stop Indy is he can't bear the idea that the world would lose the Ark.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's selfish. I don't think it's about him. I think it's about really respecting the inherent value and power of the object. And obviously there's a lot of, some biblical stuff about the Ark of the Covenant, and you can sort of obviously read it that way, read it the power of God, warnings of God, the wrath of God, all that stuff. But I also just feel like for me, maybe from a slightly more secular perspective, that looking away from the Ark is tied to that watch speech of that this is valueless. To me, it's about this idea that objects do have inherent value. They can't be manipulated. They can't be claimed at the end of the day. They are what they are. I love the little scene that gets inserted, I think, of the Ark humming on the ship and burning away the Nazi symbol. And I think I think the lore there is that Lucas really wanted that added, and it is a good little beat to keep the tension alive, to remind you.
That's something else going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Indy's got it, so he would have appeared to have won. And if does Indy win or not is the question of the movie, then it starts to deflate right there, because it appears like we're toward the end. Did Indy win? Why is the movie still going? But by inserting that, it reminds you, like, the tension is what should be done with this Ark? How should we feel about it? How should we treat it? So it's just great functionally, but also I just love the Ark burning off the Nazi symbol, like his saying, I think you can definitely read that as what decent moral thing wouldn't want to burn a Nazi symbol off of something. Yeah. But it's also, you can't own me. You can't put your label on me. I have inherent value.
I really agree with that. I absolutely agree with that, and that it's a fun little tension builder, like you said. It's there's a lot going on here. I think there's a lot Spielberg put in this film of the Jewish people versus the Nazis, even down to taking swipes at Mercedes. I think a lot of that runs through what was going on here, but relating it to the value that is inherent to that, to us all. And your crystallized point, I think, is a great point. Belloq he's a win guy, right? He's a win or loss, zero sum guy, and maybe that's why Indy puts down the bazooka. That it's not about him winning in that moment, like you said. It's about the greater good, the greater the world at large. Maybe I like that.
About the ability to understand the Ark and its meaning and its place in history, and what value could that bring to the world. I want to go back a little bit to the sort of the we talked about Indy going on a journey in terms of being a raider, a possessor, but I want to talk a little bit more about some of the ways that I think the movie invites us to wrestle with Indy's morality versus Belloq. Belloq has this, famous speech of archaeology is our religion, yet we have both fallen from the pure faith. Our methods have not differed as much as you pretend. I am a shadowy reflection of you. It would take only a nudge to make you like me, to push you out of the light. I feel like at that point the film is saying, like, is Indy in the light?
Right.
There is a ton of ways to visually analyze the film with light and dark. A lot of it is just the great style of the film and great shots, but again, it's also just there. It's part of the text. Indy is constantly moving literally in and out of the shadows. We meet him in shadow and he steps into the light. And I do think that is about introducing us to this new iconic hero, but it's also hard not to connect that to the literal imagery that Belloq is saying with shadowy reflections. He is literally in shadow, drunk, angry at a real low point as Belloq is giving this light and dark speech. Again, it is just iconic in a great way to introduce the scene, but it's a shadow that arrives at Marion's bar. And it's almost like that's the Indy she's lived with, not glasses and tweed, not leather and hat, the shadow of him in the choices he made. There are multiple shots of Sala and Indy with the Ark, but there's that one real distinctive shot of them moving it against the wall, and it's their shadows moving it. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot in the visuals that ask us to sort of play with, is Indy in the light, is Indy in the dark? How do you feel about that? Do you feel like that those shots are stylistic, iconic, or do you feel like they're there to play with these ideas of light and shadow?
I absolutely think, well, iconic, of course. Yes. Right. And there's, you're so right. That opening sequence is just this perfect introduction of this character. But I think the one that stood out to me, and I even made some notes of it, is just the shadow of Indy over Marion. It's so, again, your question of iconic, almost every shot in this film's become iconic. So it's hard to move away from that. But it's so purposeful. It's so what's there. It's so this, and it's not really him, right? It's this image of it. Not to make this direct connection to Han Solo, and that's what George didn't want to do. That's why he didn't want to cast Harrison for a long time, right? But it's that same, like there's Indy, and then there's Junior, and there's Professor Junior, right? And this is the image of the shadow, and like I think that's why I think for me Belloq actually might be my favorite so-called villain in the series. In a way of, it's such a, you could easily believe him. Indy could easily believe him. And what do we always say, especially in the Star Wars side, is not everything the villain says is true. But it definitely comes from a perspective that's dangerous. If you're not careful, it's Dooku talking to Kenobi. It's Kylo talking to Rey. It's all those kind of things. It's the same kind of energy to me as Indy wrestles with it all the way to the very end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do feel like it's selfish from Belloq's perspective, and it is almost like Palpatine's manipulation of Anakin, of like, people pat themselves on the back and claim they're do-gooders, but the Jedi want power just as much. They lie about being selfless. Yeah. Everybody wants power for themselves. So actually there's no moral problem with grabbing for power because everybody does it. Everybody's bad. And there's definitely, I think, some manipulation there of Belloq saying like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just honest. You do it too.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there's enough in the film where Indy is wrestling with his own actions, his own choices, literally becoming a shadow, literally moving into the darkness, literally moving into the light, wrestling with his choices. That this is one of those bad guy manipulations where, he hit a nerve. That Indy has been telling himself. We even get the quote when it's in the background, but it's when he's talking to the students, and he says, let's not confuse this with being a robber. Which pulling up the actual, don't confuse that with robbing, in which case we mean the removal of the contents of the barrow. So he's there in his happy place, in my mind, sharing the knowledge that he has with great respect about what is true, what is false, what is legend, what are we learning about this culture. People rated it, so it's that site that he's talking about isn't in good condition. Let's not be robbers. And I feel like he's telling himself that's who he is, but maybe he is going out and taking action that disagrees with his view of himself.
I really think that's at play more than maybe this that was given credit to this movie over the years. Not saying we're the first to come along. I'm not Belloq. Believe in my own hype there. But yeah, no, I think that's exactly what's at play. That scene I think that scene is remembered for the "I love you" on the eyelids,
which is and golden, great, hilarious.
Yeah, and that weird kid giving him the apple. I love that little beat. It was like, quick, you did that. And Brody just taking it. That scene's remembered for a lot of other things, but I love that you focus on what he's actually saying there. And this is where he's talking about folklore and what he believes. Indy believes as far as the facts take him in a way. This is you could look at this as a spiritual journey as well. I think one of the big themes throughout it is faith and trust. From the opening sequence, it's kind of a trust walk. Who do you choose? Belloq's kind of saying, you choose the wrong friends, as if he's got the Jovitos are his best friends right here. And even going later in the ship, getting on Katanga's ship, do you trust these guys? There's a lot of that stuff going on. And Indy is someone who's learned, perhaps from his childhood not to trust. And so I think that's part of the journey and going to the Belloq of it all. Yeah, absolutely. Poking at him right where it hurts the most.
Yeah, no, I love that point. I think Indy is a well-seasoned traveler. He obtains, rare artifacts. They kind of joke about, how would you describe what you do with the government people? if that's one way to say it. So I think he is very worldly. He's very aware that there are more Bellocks than Sullahs, and how vital trust is. And maybe this picture that that some of that is seeping into his actions. I feel like some of the ways that we're invited to question, is Indy on the path to, as you said, being an adventure for good? We can talk more about the ramifications of the age stuff with Marion. But for just a moment, I'm highly acknowledging that. But I want to talk a little bit more about what actually happened between them. We don't know exactly what happened with Marion. It's a shadow hanging over Indy. It's a shadow that literally walks back into her bar. I think he's got that moment of pause. He's so excited, nerdy happy when Brody goes to his place and tells him he gets to go after it. And he's packing and he's cheersing and dancing. And there's that pause and that shadow over, will she still be with him? So to me, there's an implication of he doesn't feel great about it. And then he really tries to kind of cover it up with his, I got my hat on, I got my leather jacket, I'm a tough guy now, The actual dialogue, I learned to hate you in the last 10 years. He says, I never meant to hurt you. I was a child. I was in love. It was wrong. And you knew it. You knew what you were doing. I did what I did. You don't have to be happy about it, but maybe we could help each other out. Again, lots to discuss there about the age stuff. But I feel like for me, I never really stopped to question, like, obviously, there's the age element where Marion felt like she was in over her head and that was unfair. But what is it that he actually did? Was it having a relationship, or is it that he left the relationship?
Yes. I've been waiting to find the right way to get into this, not just in this podcast, in life. There's a lot about this. I have thoughts on it, and some of it. Let me to answer your question. I think we don't know, and you could make an immediate leap to the worst of the worst, but I think there's I think he clearly left for adventure, perhaps, or pursuit of something. But also, I always take it as it caused him to fall out with Abner Ravenwood. It caused whatever happened. I don't need to know, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't have the answer for that. I guess in a way, I want to make sure I'm not carefully being careful about not defending something I shouldn't with Indy. But it's I don't know. I just sometimes the conversation around it I feel is, I don't know, surface. I'm trying to get deep. I can't think of the words.
Yeah, I mean, we have a section where we can talk about things we wrestled with. And there is just the age thing and the way it's discussed that I do wrestle with, and I do think it's an important conversation. But in terms of what we're talking about right now, which is what is the film inviting us to question Indy's morality? And I feel like in this scene, yes, because I feel like what I'm reading is Marion saying, you are old enough to know how deeply I would feel about you. And you chose something else. You left, which I feel like, to me, really sets off this juxtaposition between Marion and the Ark, where he risks her, he leaves her, he claims he can blow up the Ark to put her as the number one priority. He can't quite do that. But at the end of the day, they have come back together, and she is the treasure. I feel like it does set up that stuff. And he doesn't want to deal with it, to Belloc's point of, maybe you're not as great as you think you are, Indiana Jones. And here he is, hey, I just need something from you, Marion. Can we not even really talk about this? To me, that is an invitation to question his morality. I think he's in, and then it's an important beat when he thinks he lost her. He thinks he got her killed, or failed to defend her. And he's, it's kind of structurally a moment that in a lot of more traditional films would be the all is lost second act to third act moment. But he's in a dark, violent drunken place. Like
Mhm.
we think of all the iconic lines and the fun lines and the indomitable spirit of Indiana Jones. I don't know. I'm making up this up as we go
Yeah.
along, and it's easy to look past. Like he's in the shadow, he's drunk, borderline suicidal with that line of you want to talk to God, let's go see him together, I've got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
He's in a really, really dark place, and then in this interplay of dark and light, again, it is the straightforward plot, but you can read into it. Marion jokes about them having a child with the monkey, in this sort of playful idea of the value of family. And then he's rescued from this dark, bleak, violent place by a small army of Saul's children, right? So that is a real juxtaposition of darkness and light, of being I failed and I'm borderline ready to give up, and then I'm rescued by children.
Yeah. No. Well said on it all there too. Yeah. Well said indeed. Sorry.
Yeah.
No,
that's fine.
That's all I got. No.
We talked about this a little bit with the idea of artifacts, but I think there are these great moments where it is bullet pointed that he's wrestling with being as obsessive and possessive is Belloc, prioritizing the Ark over Marion. And I just wanted to be sure to mention one of the things that is so crystal clear in the film that it's borderline funny. It works. But the copious warnings to leave the Ark alone, Brody warns him. I feel like the line exists in the pop culture imagination. It's like nothing you've gone after before, in a fun way, right? You're going to go, hey, you've never been to this? You've never been bungee jumping? Right. Great. It's like nothing you've gone after before. But the way it's said in the film is, it's not something to be taken lightly. No one knows its secrets. It's like nothing you've ever gone after before. It's a warning to take it as seriously as possible. Sala warns him. If it is there at Tanis, then it is something that man was not meant to disturb. Death has always surrounded it. It is not of this earth. Even as Indy's having his triumph, he's found the actual site. He's digging away. Ominous swirling clouds and lightning.
Yes.
There's an attack on subtlety in the Well of Souls, where he goes to gets it. He descends into a dark pit full of snakes, which have some religious connotations. Those statues are jackals looking up and screaming at anyone who would enter. And then when he makes it out of that chamber, it's with Marion by finding a crack of light. And he literally ascends out of this pit full of warning. And from that point on, I feel like Indy's wobbled. He's had his moments of darkness. He's had his moments of maybe lying to himself. But from that point on, from when he emerges, he's much more the adventurer for good, as you're talking about. His mission is more clear of the Nazis can't have that Ark. They can't have Marion. The Ark has value. Marion has value. These monsters can't have them. And my mission isn't to get those things for myself. My mission is to keep those things that have value safe. So I feel like he emerges from that pit with much clearer forward movement of I got to fight a large German mechanic. I got to drag myself under a truck. I'll do anything to keep those things safe.
I know. I think you're absolutely right. It's one of those things that's just perhaps as clear as the light shining through the back end of the Well of Souls, which also is one of my favorite things that you just could have moved that thing and you could have got in there, German. It was right there in front of you the whole time. But that's the thing. It's right there in front of you the whole time. I love your point about Marcus Brody. He has a moment later on with Dr. Elsha Snyder in The Last Crusade, can't we get to it too, where he's kind of got the same, like, messing with powers. You have no idea. You have no idea. And how that's kind of a theme all the way through it in this in this adventure. I think time is taking away that impact and taking away the impact of Indy's response. You know me, I'm always careful. Let me put 6 bullets in a gun as I go fight the power of God. It's all kind of clear. One of my favorite little scenes is when they were at the Iman and he's reading the staff and the wind blows. It's kind of a chill-inducing moment for me. It is so otherworldly. And I love that. And that's part of the pursuit as well. This faith and trust and the power of it all. What do you believe? And Indy going back to his classroom. And this is something he's a intellectual. So he's going to look at things this way. I think he deals with it a little bit in Last Crusade as well, but just, he's such a I've heard this bedtime story too guy. And that's who he is in that classroom in the opening scene.
Yeah.
And the warnings are all around him.
Yeah, and it's not like he doesn't hear them, but he's like, yeah, cool. Well, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the culmination. That is the looking away. I think a different film would have had the flashes of the warnings, right? So this idea that he is hearing these things, he is questioning himself, he is making choices. He doesn't want to be Belloc. He doesn't want to slip into being possessive and obsessive and selfish in his pursuit of these things. He wants to respect their inherent value, respect their power. And that's, I think, what gives him the epiphany, the knowledge to look away.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah.
Any other big picture ideas for you that you wanted to discuss?
No, we got the faith and trust one, which is part of the spiritual journey here. I think that's about it. We talked on the power of the myth. I wanted to get to that one as well. There's a lot of other themes at play that a lot of people have put on this film. It's a very American film at a time. I love the time that it was made, the beginning of this 80s decade, which is not necessarily the greatest thought, but I was reading a lot of think pieces from back in the day and all through the years of just that are there's, because Marion has a line, if you can't do this to me, I'm American. And so there's a lot of that at play in the movie. It's not necessarily, I don't think it would be the same if you made the movie now, but it does run all the way through it. But it's a very Spielbergian thing to me. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the growing awareness of 80s being the decade of greed and even former hippies going, yeah, actually, yes. The accumulation of wealth is pretty awesome. It's a really fascinating lens to look at it through.
Yeah.
And how much that stuff does just seep in. I do feel like I was talking about at the very beginning that there is this great meta resonance that if the film is about coming to appreciate the inherent value of the past and that knowledge can come with them, understanding can come with them, but maybe they just have value in and of themselves, that's a pretty fascinating way to look at the creation of this film, of Lucas, Spielberg, so many of the other creators having a deep love and attachment to the adventure serial, but also to the drop dead classics of a bygone era. There's shots that are just straightforward Casablanca. It's not just the adventure serial out of the frying pan into the fire structure. It is also combining like the adventure serial with Casablanca, with the fallible hero who maybe doesn't get what they want. But all of it is about looking back to, like, remember when we had these films that balanced comedy, romance, intrigue, action, that they were charming and they were fun. And when you were a kid and you saw them, they made you just want to ride on your bike and stick a baseball card in it to make it sound even cooler. Like the act in the late 70s, 80s to say that relic of our actual past has inherent value. Let's bring it into the light is meaningful to me.
Yeah. And a lot of what was what they were going for in this era, indeed.
Yeah. Final thought for me is a short one, but just there's also this I think agreement between the way the film is made and what the film is about in the Spielberg obsession with iconography. Obviously, it's a Spielberg staple. It pops up other places, certainly in the Indiana Jones film. But the amount of care given to introducing elements, You know, the build up to Indy, that we see this part, we see his hat, we see his whip, we see the individual parts that build him into an icon before he steps from the shadows into the light. There's a build to his face. The way the whip is introduced, like we were talking about with the Ben Burt sound effect, but the way it's it is singled out and there's a spotlight put on it. The importance of his silhouette. That's a thing that gets talked about with Star Wars. That it's a part of what makes these characters iconic, is they have these silhouettes, and the interest in building Indy's silhouette. There's a ton of other examples where the characters that we're being introduced to now are elevated to this legendary, larger than life status. So it's almost like we're archaeologists, and just like Indy is discovering the Ark, we're discovering Indy.
Yeah.
And I think it is a part of the power. I think it is. I think particularly, well, I'll say for anybody of any age, but I know a lot of people. I wasn't lucky enough to see it in 81, but I have a lot of friends who are like 12, 13, 15. They saw it in the summer of 81, and it imprinted on them so deeply. And I think part of that is an incredibly successful artistic manipulation to make you look up at the big screen in awe at Indiana Jones, the whip, the hat, the shadow, the fallible man that you still want to be. That is really a powerful part of this film.
I absolutely think it is. I think that's one of the reasons I do consider it so perfect in a way. And yes, the bonus of getting there first, but it just absolute art to everything you're talking about here. So thought out, so purposeful.
Yeah, really powerful. I set aside here a moment for us to discuss the meaning of the title. I feel like we've dived into the Raiders part pretty thoroughly. Do you have anything else that you want to analyze about the title of the film?
Well, as someone who is I'll make the jokes every now and then too of, well, my day it was called Star Wars, not New Hope, but that could get tiresome fast. So not to sound like that there, but I've always just been it's the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Just that's what it is. But the change to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I actually think works for me now more than ever, because I don't think Indy is one of them. So yeah, I think it does do a good job in separating them.
Yeah, I think the title is obviously it evokes old adventure serial titles, old pulp titles, but the fact that it isn't, Pursuit of the Lost Ark or Discovery of the Lost Ark or Crisis of the Lost Ark or whatever, or Curse. It's Raiders. It's the idea of, should it be messed with? The title really invites you to analyze it in that way. I know friends who are frustrated because they think calling it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark is like calling it The Empire in The Empire Strikes Back. I'm like, he's already in the title. Yeah. The threat is that he is one of the Raiders and he chooses not to be. But I agree with you. I think it can also be analyzed this is the story of how Indiana Jones does not become a Raider of this artifact.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, if you're listening on Patreon, we're just going to roll through. But in the interest of putting this on our public channel, we're going to take a quick break. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that break, Patreon listeners. We are going to go into some of the thrill, the fun. And hey, is there meaning and depth in the thrill and the fun? Let's find out. Let's talk favorite action moments, Ken, and how just brutally long is your list?
Super long. At one point I realized I was just writing down every scene. Really, truthfully, that I'd be like, oh, that's not where we're going. So I do think you talked so beautifully about the opening sequence and what it means for Indy. It's hard to, and yes, there's a lot of things to ask about it and all these themes we're talking about, but this is the moment where we get to just look at this intro. It's just a movie in itself, and it's Indy's first crack of the whip, the emergence from the shadows, like you said. I love that nothing works easily for him, right? Every leap is almost disaster. He's turned on. Alfred Molina making his theatrical film debut, dropping the whip. We got was it Forrestal, the former rival, a little bit, maybe also former mentor, finding his body there. There's something in the script I was reading that the Indy takes the skeleton, takes the body, and lays it down out of a sign of respect. And they cut that from the final thing for time, pacing, and momentum, which I agree with. But there's all that there, and then the rock chase. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on this opening sequence, and it would be worthy.
Yeah, it does. It really sets the stakes, and it sets the fun, and that the great power of the unknown, of like, that's what adventure is, right? Like you have to risk discomfort, fear, danger to pass through and find something joyful or golden in this particular case. And I think even the way it's shot, so everything is murky, dark, covered with cobwebs, but then that idol is glowing in the center of the room. There's so much about it that's great. So there is meaning packed into all the action. I tried my best to write down individual beats that really spoke to me, because half the film is action and comedy, more than half the film. I actually wrote down more comedy moments.
Same.
But yeah. This is what's one of the things that's so wonderful about this film. I had beat after beat where it's like, does that go in action or comedy?
Same. Yeah, no, so funny. Yeah, and I'm sure we aren't the only ones. If they're this, yes, it's so true. Often they're just the same.
They're just the same. Yeah. So one of the first ones that I went to, you've already said, and maybe you have it in your comedy. The fight in the bar in Nepal is really fun. There's just a straightforward gun battle, but the asking for whiskey and the hitting the guy in the head, I guess that is comedy and action. But yeah, the way he delivers it, like he's ordering something at the bar. There's initially with just like the gunfire, like, cool, this is great. This is a tribute to, old westerns and adventure serials, just bullets whizzing, probably some of the first just canned sound effects that Ben Burt recognized as a kid and said, what if we made new ones? Because this is so it starts not boring at all, but like, great. And the whiskey moment is like such a great subversion. We know that trope of hitting somebody over the head in a bar fight with the bottle, and just the great subversion of it, of ordering it from the bar, and then from her bar, and then the behind the head hit. It's a great action moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said earlier, it's comedy, but I'll talk about it here. But just like the bullets go through the keg, and she takes a sip before going to the action. Just such a human moment, such a funny moment.
Yep, that is absolutely great. The burning hand, that pays off later, and the smoking in the snow. That's all great action as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You get it going to just like, hey, whatever, this sequence being just a sample of the whole series. I mean, just what's going on with Tote, and that's a side thing. And then it's played. It's painful, but it's played for a little bit of you got it, but then you don't pick up right away. You can't predict that that's going to be a plot point later on. It's just everything about it is great. It's just so wonderfully chaotic. The flames going. There's two versions of there's the coal flame, and then there's the logs being knocked over. All those little beats work.
Yeah, and it is the call to adventure. It is the plot point that she's stuck there. Yeah. That maybe she doesn't want to be here. That things have been really rough since Indy left and her father died, and she is strong and getting by and suckering people with booze bets, which is one of the greatest scenes and one of the greatest character introductions in the history of cinema, in my opinion. Yeah. But then that Indy is such a this is where he's really in line. One of those great moments where he's in line with the cinematic James Bond. Not as true of the literary James Bond, but the cinematic James Bond of like the man walks into a place and it bursts into flames. Like he is, he's destructive. Like the action scene really is about burning down her world. Yeah, because he's the one who brings the Nazis there. Speaking of affecting the plot, burns down her world, and she's forced to leave the proverbial farm and go off on the adventure and be his goddamn partner.
I love that line. Just love
Yeah.
that line.
Uh, later on in the in Egypt, I like Marion having those great charming moments with the frying pan and the initial like, I got a weapon. Oh, you got a knife. Okay.
Yeah.
But still turning it around, turning again. The actual moments that speak to me are these sort of subversions where she is the stereotypical damsel in distress, running from this assailant, and uses that to turn things around on him. Of like, you assume I'm just running in terror, but I'm I'm welcoming you into a frying pan trap and whack.
Yeah, and her 6-inch figure we saw at Celebration comes with that frying pan. So,
Damn it! I didn't want to remember that. Damn it!
I took photos of all those figures. I just keep scrolling. One day I'll buy them.
So what else you got?
The Escape from the Well of Souls. I love your thematic analysis of it. I think it's so true. It was. I'm not a huge fan of snakes either, so that's always been a man. I'm glad I'm not there scene for me, which makes it just so much more fun. But it's a powerful, fun sequence. It's a little horror movie in this adventure movie, but it all ends with the flying wing fight, which I just absolutely love. Pat Roach. A lot of folks know who Pat Roach is. A professional wrestler turned actor, turned stuntman in Willow, as well as this stuff. I just love everything about that fight. And one of the things I love about it is Indy fights dirty. He's a bit of a dirty fighter because he has to kick it in the groin, pointing at the ground. Love that little trick, the dirt in the eyes. He has to, and that's part of the joy of Indy, right? He's not really cut out for this, but he's got to do it.
Oh yeah, no, that is one of the fights that just really cements the charm of Indiana Jones. I love the absolutely cartoonish but extremely effective wobble knee punch.
Yes.
Like the one punch in Indy would be like, if there's any way I could leave this fight, I would absolutely get out of it.
Yes.
I have it in comedy as well, but just like the way the German mechanic, whose action figure you can buy, is excited by this opportunity, taking the shirt off. It isn't for him like, oh, I need to stop this guy. It's like, this is an opportunity to just pound this yank. And Indy's seen him coming and be like, yeah, I'm coming. Like, in my worst days working at Kinko's, I did that to customers of like, yeah, I'm coming. It's so funny of like this, it's sort of acknowledging the artifice of it, almost acknowledging the dance of it of like, yeah, I know you're not going to let me do what I need to do without trying to kill me. So I'll climb down and we'll do this. It's so funny. The wobble knee punch is great. The joy of the fight is great.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Jumping back for just a second, the snakes in the fire is great. I really like the one specific shot where he's climbing up to the jackal statue and surprised by the snake in the mouth and does the head turn, the head twist with the fire in the mouth is great.
Yeah. No, just there's some comedy stuff we can talk about too, but it's just so classic. And again, the bonus of getting there first is sometimes can be used against these things where. Classic sitcom wasn't as great as you thought it was. It just was first. I understand that. That's not the case. That's not the case.
Yeah, no.
The editing, the tension, everything about it. Going back to that flying wing fight, like Frank Marshall is the pilot, everything about it with Marion and her. There's a great moment when she realizes what's about to happen and she's locked in there. And there's a real just, oh no, like everything about it. Just, it's a textbook template setter.
Yeah. There's so much that's fun about Indy's fight with the German mechanic that we're talking about, and I think it really solidifies what I love about Indy, where it feels like this isn't an opportunity to prove himself. This is a horrendous thing he just needs to get through to get what he actually wants. I think it really solidifies that. I think there's honestly some of his sort of morality in it. Of this is not about ego. This is just about something that needs to get done. And I'm always so caught up in that. I forget that that Marion just opens fire on the Nazis with an airplane machine gun, which is also pretty damn cool.
Yeah, and slides into the back, cockpit for that. There, the gun turret. Yeah, it's a wonderful sequence of violence against Nazis.
It really is. It really is. That is perhaps the big moral of all Indiana Jones is bleep Nazis.
Love it.
Getting into the epic truck chase. A couple things that I really, really love in that is I think it's one of the best sort of sequences of out of the frying pan into the fire of like they're in the snakes, the pit with the snakes, the well of souls. They escape. They fight the German mechanic. They accidentally blow up their own means of transportation. Just a brief break, and then truck. What truck? And gotta go after it. It's really firing on all cylinders with the adventure serial thrill of it keeps getting bigger, it keeps getting more. But I really love Indy's glee at ramming the Nazis. I think it starts with the motorcycle when he sees the motorcycle in the side view mirror and like, I'm gonna ram you. And it happens again and again. And it is one of those moments of charm where this is the moment, we've been talking about, of like, how much is this a story of he feels the need to put on the jacket and be a man? Like, I don't think that's what this is. I think this is like, I hate Nazis. I hate being in this, having to do this. But I got one up on him finally. I finally got one up on him. That's the way I interpret the glee. How do you feel about the glee?
No, I think you're right, because some of the things I was reading about and mentioning earlier, I'm not here to debate or argue them at all. I think there's definitely a classic sense of masculinity all through Harrison Ford and all through Indiana Jones and Han Solo and everything, without a doubt. But I think when you really look at it closely, again, that's what I say, this adventurer for good, who he's fighting and why he's doing it. I think if he could avoid all of this, he would. He doesn't want any of this. He doesn't want Belloc chasing him. He wants to get in and out of there with that idol. And he wants to just get the Ark to safety. He wants to get married. He doesn't want to do any of this. And therefore, I think you can view it a little bit different than I think I've seen some of the writings about it, to be honest. And so I love that. The glee is, it's them. It's not that this is who I would just do this to anybody. I'm doing this to them in the moment. So I love it. And it's also just a great, come on, Harrison's winning smile as he's doing that. Wonderful.
So good. And then, I know it is like one of the marquee moments, but the trip under the truck and back, just every element of that, every shot of that, wow, that's a really cool action scene, but also like the fun in the absurdity of it, of just going full circle around the truck and doing the same thing to the driver is great.
Yeah, no, great sequence. You get Vic Armstrong, his stunt double there. You get Peter Diamond, working on some of the stunts in this film, coordinating as well. Just, it's class. That is classic Hollywood stuff right there. I love that these filmmakers who are now classics themselves were like, hey, what if we did this? What if we did this like Ben-Hur chariot chase sequence? Like, what if we did some fun? Yeah, it just, and the joy of them all putting that together just comes through.
Yeah, and the history of just British entertainment, because Peter Diamond did stunt work for Doctor Who, so like it's great to be watching Doctor Who and like you see Peter Diamond and like, oh, somebody's gonna get punched because Peter Diamond is here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Final sort of action thing for me is just appreciating. You think of Indiana Jones as big action adventure, and then the truck chase is the last big set piece in terms of Indy throwing punches, but the last big set piece is the lightning and the melting. How do you feel about that? Is that one of your things that you look forward to? Did it scare you as a kid? Where are you at with it now?
Come on, you know me. Everything scared me as a kid. It was horrendous. Horrendous. Yeah, it's interesting to say that, because I often, and this is a film, like you and so many listening have watched time and time again, but there was a point maybe in the 90s when I'd put in the old VHS tapes of this, and I would almost forget that the truck sequence existed. It was like, oh yeah, because I would maybe skip over that and get to the end. So the truck sequence has some value to me as well. And also, the Sears catalog. Did you ever collect the Indy miniatures back in the day?
No.
There were, and they'd be in the Sears wish book, the Sears catalog, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't. Someone out there is more of a toy expert in terms of the Indiana Jones figures and stuff. There was kind of some of the failed Kenner lines along the ways, but this was like almost the miniatures similar to the Star Wars ones. But it was the digging scenes. It was a little bit of the Well of Souls. Might have had the flying wing there too, but it had the trucks and the horse and Indy on the horse, and that elevated this scene, because I think there's other scenes, the action sequences I love more in this film, but so it was this when I remember, oh yeah, we got the truck chase scene. It was a bonus sequence that then leads to everything else, and everything else after that is gravy to me. The final sequence is more scary, it's more thrilling, it's more spiritual, and I almost overlook it as an action sequence to talk about the final stuff with the Ark.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's this rumbling of the supernatural. Everybody's warning about it. That wind seems supernatural. The Indy, you're getting close to digging it up. The skies turn foul and lightning's going. And this is the explosion. I think at the time, if you watch any ILM documentary, this is one of the places along the path of them having fun developing this, both the ghosts and the melting. It is the history of 80s cinema. People who like 80s cinema, who grew up with 80s cinema, is like, hey, Blue Mist. Here we go, Blue Mist. That is the main star of films from the 80s. Blue CGI mist, not CGI, special effects mist. So there's all that value in it. But I really do like the film's explicitly playing with light and dark, from Belloc's speech to all of the shadows and stepping into the light, and that contrast of it looks beautiful, and then it turns into nope. That moment is great. The melting, I don't even know how I saw it. I don't know why I saw it, but somehow I knew about that melting. Probably saw pictures of it in Starlog magazine,
right?
Before I saw the film. I think that was one of the things that probably made my parents be like, yeah, we don't know about this one.
Yeah.
But for me, just the initial lightning going through the souls of the Nazis, that shot, even more than the melting, is like, yeah, there's something powerful.
Yeah.
Something powerful about that. Like, you want to pervert this thing that wants to be left alone. There's a joyful fantasy of like, no Nazis, no.
Yeah. and just Indy picking up on what's going on and closing his eyes. Love it.
Yeah, great stuff. Any other action moments before we move to comedy?
More the same with comedy, but no, we can start laughing.
There's so much comedy, and it is tied in with the action. I'll throw this out here. I didn't write as much down in action about that first sequence, which is some of the most famous action in cinema, because I was just obsessed with this one moment that I always forget is coming, but I love, is when Indy makes the leap across the chasm without the whip, and he gets a hold of that branch in the smile before the branch gives, right?
It's the best, man. Those are the things that make Indy, man, right? Those are absolutely the things that make Indy, and why I would rebuff some of the conversation about what the character represents, and maybe some people can take what he represents the wrong way. Completely possible, because trust me, that happens all through media. But I love that smile. I love that laugh. I did it. Oh no, you didn't. Oh, it's everything to me.
And it isn't about like ego or cockiness, right? It's about like, I just want to live,
survive.
I just want to get out of here alive. It isn't. Yes, I absolutely agree, and would love to read more. Like, there's a ton about Indy that is a celebration of masculinity. However he feels about it, he puts on the leather, and he talks tough, and he punches, and he makes his way out, and he's got an eye and a lot more for the ladies, and that is very present in Temple of Doom in Last Crusade. But to me, it often feels like the heart of the character is that really, I just want to get through my day. It is one of those moments. I talk about this with Star Wars too. It feels so relatable. Like, I have never in an ancient temple in Peru tried to leap over a chasm. But I feel like I've lived this moment. I feel like I've gotten an email and like the first line makes me think it's going to be good news and I'm smiling. And then I get to the next line like, oh no, that is what this feeling is.
Yeah, I love that you highlighted that. It's wonderful.
Yeah. What's your first comedy moment?
I put Alfred Molina's spider back there. How do you say his name? Sapido, I think.
Yeah.
I'm better with spiders than I used to be. Maybe because my job in the house is to remove spiders from it, so I use them a little bit more. This could have. This type of comedy beat might be used elsewhere and maybe driven to the ground, but it just works for me here. Especially a character that's kind of like, hey, one spider, I'm here to help you, and not realizing the danger they're in or the potential danger the spiders might not be doing anything. But you know what I mean? Like it's so his character, it's so the moment, and I love everything about it. It's just great. And it's as a kid, it terrified me.
Terrifying and funny. And in that 2008 doc, Alfred Molina tells a really funny story about how they accomplished that, and it being his sort of his first shot, and he'd never done film before. and the length they went to for it to almost not work. We've said it a couple times, but I think it is one of those, like, this is an absolute classic of cinema by one of the most successful directors ever. But it is so heartening to hear all the moments where it almost didn't work.
Yeah.
Where you had to push real hard. It's, and I think people who are creating need to hear that and remember that these things are not foretold. Everybody runs into problems.
I'm in a period of my career where I need to be reminded of this, of the risk taken, and the film itself was a leap across and a smile as things start to fail.
And it all comes together. Yeah. We probably just haven't said the name Lawrence Kasdan enough. Obviously, the initial idea is Lucas, Spielberg's direction, the people he hired, the cinematography, Ben Burtt, the absolute charm of Harrison Ford and Karen Allen. But Lawrence Kasdan, Lucas even says it in that documentary as well, about like Larry just took it to another level. He gave it all of this comedy and all of this charm, and all that rambling. Maybe Lawrence Kasdan didn't come up with this. I don't know that lore, but the Love You Eyes are just a fascinating detail. Talk about audiences kind of obsessing on plot of like, why is this episode here? What does it do? Right. The Love You Eyes could almost be looked at as like, what's that filler moment there for? It doesn't advance the plot. Like that girl never comes back. But the sheer amount of flavor, charm, information that we get from the way Indy reacts to it, the like great over the topness of it, like to think through what that young woman got up that day and said, what am I going to do today? All right, love you on my eyelids, and blink at him until he sees it and see how he reacts. It's so great.
Yeah, and there was some notes about that possibly being quote unquote improvised, which still means they had to plan that. Maybe on the set, someone said, "Hey, what about this?" But I think that's what I love about Kasdan's script is there's a lot of room for the performances. There's a lot of room for the energy, and that was part of. Maybe the doc covered this. I need to refresh myself on the doc you're talking about. I have that DVD set, but that part of Harrison's negotiations for this was that he'd have the ability to rewrite his dialogue, which is fascinating. But none of that takes away from Kasdan. It's amazing. Good old Larry was a month into his professional screenwriting career when Spielberg kind of said, "This kid's got something. He's got some moxie." And then they go have this 9-day meeting at Spielberg's assistant's office in Sherman Oaks. They meet there for like a certain amount of days to get it all out. And Lawrence Kasdan goes, "I realized they had a lot of big set pieces, but they just needed me to connect them all." In this kind of like down, like almost self-loathing kind of like I was just there to connect them. But that is tremendously difficult. And then to have all these
incredibly difficult.
Yes, and have all these amazing set pieces, and that some of them, as we all know from the lore, go on to other the other films, especially Temple of Doom. It's just there's a reason he ended up having the career he had from this point on, and that the reason George goes, hey, I also got some space stuff you might need to help me with here. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him.
Yeah. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know the lore of the Love You Eyes, and if that was a Lawrence Kasdan thing, but I really like your point that he really captured that tone, and it does have overlapping qualities with everything else he's touched. You can feel Empire and Return of the Jedi and Solo and Force Awakens in this. There's just kind of a turn of phrase and both a warmth and a snark at the same time, and a deep understanding and connection to the kind of banter of films gone by that Lawrence Kasdan is just a master of. And I love the way that Indy reacts to the way it's shot. We're like, did I see that? And she's like, you did.
Yeah.
and he isn't James Bond. He doesn't smile and give you talk to you after class eyes. He stumbles and it gets him off of his train of what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that tells us a lot about the character.
I agree with you there. Absolutely.
What are other comedy moments for you?
All right, we got Marion out drinking the Australian climber. This intro to the scene. I mean, we talked about a lot. It's just perfect. But just talk about pacing and the beats just playing out perfectly, and everything about her at that moment. It is a celebration of Karen Allen, the performer, and what she brought to Marion. Even when Major Tote comes in, and he's in his freaky way. Didn't Dr. Jones tell you other people will be coming here? Must have slipped his mind. Again, taking the drink from the keg. Everything about her character in that moment. It's one of those classic. This is why this is one of those films taught in screenwriting classes, as I was in 1994. Of just every little beat has some wonderful purpose to it. Whether it was made up on the set or written into it, it all comes together. That's how these things are made, and I love that. But the look on his face, the Australian climber's face, as he slowly passes over, has been one of my favorite comedy beats my entire life.
The tip over is hilarious, and I could go on about Henri Bergson's philosophy of comedy of the mechanical, the incrustation of the mechanical versus elan vital, like that idea that we are organic flowing creatures, but rigidity creeps in, and like that to me is a lot of the comedy of that kind of body language, where he's frozen in the moment where he thinks he had victory. Rigid, yes, collapsing. It's incrustation. I had that on my list too, of Marion taking the drink from the whiskey barrel. That's great to know that moment sings to you as well. Yeah, absolutely great stuff. Some of this comedy list is weird because there's like, it's one of the most famous jokes in cinema. Like, right, what a revelation! But how can you not include them? The gunshot to the swordsman is, and I know the whole lore of it was supposed to be a thing, but everybody had various horrible stomach bugs. There's quite a story from the actor of Solo, Jonathan Rhys-Davies, about that. But it's another one of those moments that helps solidify Indy of like, I'm not in this to prove anything. The violence is a thing I have to do to get past it to the goal. So there's comedy and there's character. How do you feel about it?
I love it's one of those things. You're right. It's so just it's one of the first things as a young kid in the 80s you learn of some of the lore. Yeah, Indy was pooping his pants during that scene. Do you know that? And that's why they did it. And then they shot the scene and got the venerable stunt performer Terry Richards, I believe his name is, who talk about the English Connection, appeared in a lot of other things that we talk about and love. So I love it. But what I love now, appreciate more than anything, is Indy does that. And the villagers rejoicing in the background. The sword's been done, as if they've been freed. There's just there's a whole story going on there with that guy, and it's fantastic. And I believe they made a figure of that guy back in the day too.
Yes, they did. Act it out, kids. Yeah, That was great. The torture device coat hanger. That's one that I sometimes forget about as it's coming up, and I really wanted to highlight that because it's well shot, well orchestrated. But you and I talk about this with comedy a lot of how much the power is often in the reaction, and Belloc and Marion's reaction absolutely sells the joke. The shot where they're in terror, and then oh, come on. The reaction is what sells this joke.
I absolutely think you're right. Absolutely right. And a little insight into Belloc's relationship with them all, right? Not defending that guy, but it's just I love that.
Yep. Like, yeah, and Belloc's always, thinking he can get past him. He can one up him. What are some other moments for you?
Another classic. This is one my pal Mark Riley and I quote to each other randomly on Tuesdays. Bad Dates. Just love that sequence. Again, talking about tensions. That's not comedy. It's tension. But Sala just always breaking into song. I am the monarch of the sea. Just the whole sequence there. I've always considered it one of my favorite little on-screen beats and jokes.
Yeah, no, my only qualm is that, I got to feel bad that a monkey in a little jacket dies. But besides that,
yeah, agreed.
I know he's a bad monkey. And some of that comedy, the communication with his handler, where the monkey's like, "Can I leave?" And the handler's like, "No, stay."
Yeah. Yeah, the monkeys. Look, I understand Indy burning snakes as well, but I'm always trying to protect the animals. But it is a Nazi sympathizing monkey, and I do enjoy the Zig Heil scene is funny, because it just. I don't know. I wonder, in a way, it takes any power from that symbol away when, like, the Nazi agent kind of sees the monkey do it and goes, "Yeah, you're right. To go back." It's just uses comedy to undercut this horrible thing to me, and I've always enjoyed that beat.
I think it's a long tradition, starting with what was when the Nazis were in power. Is you take away people's power by mocking it, particularly. Something as self-serious and certain about their power and their righteousness as the Nazis. And I think a fascinating conversation that we have mocked Nazis for so long and turned them into a comedy joke that is almost, I think, a part of the problem of getting younger generations to fully understand the reality of them, because they seem like cartoon villains if you don't look harshly into the truth of what they were. Things like the great, this is ridiculous. Let's make fun of them. And the monkey's fate is also like, hey, you look at you. The monkey is collateral damage that they don't care about. Because that's what you get when you sign up with Nazis, monkey. But this idea that something to take their power away in an interesting way maybe sometimes makes it harder to try to communicate to younger generations of, like, we did this to undermine the true terror, and you must respect the true terror. Yeah.
And this is the Spielberg Center conversation we have of just like how he goes from 1941 and comedy and Indy and then Last Crusade. And then eventually it was like, I'm going to do Schindler's List. I'm going to do Saving Private Ryan. And I'm going to approach some of these bigger themes in more serious ways. Not saying it was like he felt he needed to do it or something, but it's just the growth and his progression of just like, hey, let me also remind you of what this is all about.
Yeah, what this has always been about. And we're going to get even more Indy punching Nazis in Dial of Destiny. A couple other comedy moments for me. I love it in the tent when Marion is sort of released and invited to dinner, and she's got that sort of like haughty, I'm above this all walk, but she's doing it on her knees. It's just a great little comedy beat.
Yeah.
When you were saying you and Riley quote something, I was thinking you were maybe going to go to the moment with Indy in the well when he says, "Ha ha ha."
That is such a like Harrison moment. And if Han Solo could swear a little bit more, if Han Solo was an Andor, that'd be his line. I love that line. I love that. Yeah, the whole thing. It's very dangerous. You go first. All this great. John Rhys Davies.
Mm-hmm.
Toad's line of "You Americans are all the same, overdressing for the wrong occasions." I love that line.
Yeah, yeah, and it is just awful, weird little man who seems to love torture, like being very like, but the way I dress is appropriate for every occasion. Like, all right, do you think you're dressed appropriately when you have to take your hat off in the on the island and mop your bald head?
Okay. You bring him up, and he's a bad man. He's a villain. When Indy has the bazooka, I don't know if I've ever really paid attention to it. That whole sequence, Toad sits down. As if like, oh, God, yeah. He's like wiping his head and everything. It's like, I can't do this. I'm not made for this.
I didn't sign up for this. I got my hand burned. Jeez, yeah. In the list of utterly iconic, but you can't pass up. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. It is, and it comes at such a great moment in the film where he can't give up, right?
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. What's your relationship to that one? Is that loom large in your legend?
As you know, and people, listeners, longtime listeners, I probably relate to it too much. Where I just have trouble abiding any plans because I just like, well, it didn't work for Indy, so it's just like I have to make sure I don't live this line too much. It's just it's always been one of my favorites and one of the things I love about Indy.
Yeah, absolutely great. Captures that spirit, and I think captures that reality of life to me. Of I am a planner. I do like to plan. I think there are some things that you can set yourself up for a better result. You can make things easier for other people around you by planning. But plans are never 100%. They always change. They always have a crack, and you have to also be willing to embrace this spirit of, I don't know, I'm making this up as I go. The plan didn't work or the plan changed. And now I have to just be like, this to me is like the spirit of what was fun for me when I did improv comedy of like, this is jumping off the cliff and figuring out how you land. As much as writing can be planning, that's the hardest thing about starting to write something is you're throwing yourself off a cliff. And while you are writing, you figure out how you're going to land. Even if you have the most detailed outline, you're going to get to an Indiana Jones moment where you're like, oh, wait, this doesn't make any sense. I'm making this up as I go. It's literally what you're doing, no matter how much you plan. And I think it's a thing that's lost in a lot of the art and screenwriting discussion and why I bristle against was it planned? There's no plan that's foolproof. Creators are creating things out of thin air. You're always going to get to an Indy point, and you should embrace it like Indy does. No, well said indeed. And even in stand-up, one of the guiding principles I try to get to, and I fail a lot, is because of fear. But is one famous comic, I forget, once said, but Alice and I always say it to each other is the set list is just backup. And that's not also true. You know, you got to have a set list. You got to know where you're going. But like that spirit, it's a spirit thing. Sometimes you just got to jump on a horse and chase a truck. Yep. Exactly. Going from iconic to one of the lines I don't feel it quoted as much, it really cracks me up, is the ship captain Katanga saying, "I've heard a lot about you. Your appearance is just as I imagined." And then he himself laughing. It's one of those great underdog moments of Indiana Jones, and it sort of reframes it where we sort of see like he's beat up, the leather jacket and the hat and the whip, and he's so cool, and like to be seen from the outside of like, you massive bleep up. Like I love that.
Yeah. It's the truth.
Yeah. Just a couple more for me. I'll kick it back to you. To the Marion's classic line of, "Well, God damn it, Indy, where doesn't it hurt?" That whole sequence, great. I love that is in some ways the big romance sequence. He falls asleep.
Yes,
that's another one that undercuts this sort of like Indy as a temple to masculinity. That's not a James Bond thing. Maybe more modern Bond storytelling or literary Bond would fall asleep from injuries, but not cinematic Bond for the majority of his career. This is something different to undercut it of like, no, he's too tired. He's too beat up. What are your feelings talking about iconic lines of it? It's not the years, honey, it's the mileage. Is that also an important part of your life?
It's now is right, but it's one of those lines of that at the time. I'm seeing this when I'm 6 and 7, and I don't necessarily connect to it, but now I definitely feel it, and I love that. And and Harrison's so young in this film too.
Yeah, in comparison, yeah. It's amazing. It's so good, especially when it would be a great, cool guy line at the beginning of the film, but like we just went through that with him. We just saw the mileage of like, final one for me is another great moment of kind of subverting the tropes of the steel uniform. I love the jacket that doesn't fit bit.
I do, and I was thinking too. Is like, have we seen that? Had we seen that before? I don't think so. And that was kind of playing with the trope, like you said. And if it shows up again, it's probably referenced Indiana Jones more than anything else now, right? So I love it. It's so perfect. So great.
Yeah, absolutely great. Any other comedy moments for you? I kind of gobbled up some of the big iconic ones, but I want to make sure we're not leaving anything on the table that you wanted to talk about.
Now, you mentioned truck. What truck? Love the energy behind that. I mentioned the Mercedes thing, reading into a little bit of that was it's a very real world history of Mercedes at the time and their involvement with what was going on in World War II, we'll just say. And Spielberg kind of putting that in there with the cymbal breaking on purpose is kind of a little dig.
I didn't know that, Laura. That's great.
Yeah, I just kind of like that. Stevens, he's got some messages in his films.
Yep. And boy, I'll say it again. It might not be for all listeners, but man, did I love The Fabelmans. I loved it as a film, and I loved it as a lot of insight on this creator that we've all spent a long time with. Yeah. So moving on from comedy, I think we've done it. We cracked the 2-hour mark. We'll be wrapping up here pretty soon. Is there anything that you struggle with or question? Do you want to examine some of the ways in which maybe the film is of its time in 1981, or maybe of its time from the 30s and 40s being updated into what was then the modern day?
Well, actually, that's one of the key points. And this is, I don't have any great insight on it, but we're looking at a film made in 1981 that was about a story told in 1936, which, by the way, was only 45 years prior. So, we do a movie today. It's 1978.
That's the mileage.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And I do believe this is a perfect film for the time, and it's a perfect film in terms of studying and how to make this stuff. And not that you want to just copy everything here, but and that you need to learn the Sid Field 3-act structure and memorize every page number. But it has that kind of stuff. But I also, it's important to keep the context. And even I think I'm struggling with how to address like some of the stuff with Indy and Marion, because I think it's all valuable, and it's all about how we've changed as a society and look at some of this stuff. And it didn't probably raise any eyebrows in 1981, but it definitely wouldn't have raised eyebrows in 1936. And I'm not saying the creators had that in mind. Like, the fact she was 15 or 16, it didn't matter. It just, we've changed, and we should look at it differently. But this film was made it was put together in the 70s. And I think, I do think context is important when you're going to hold any film to the fire. And I think that's a good starting point. And my big thing is, I was reading some of the stuff, and I think you mentioned some of the Karen Allen stuff, is if you do this same film now, and we had never heard of Indiana Jones, I think the balance between Indy and Marion would be way more even. Now, this is his movie. It's his title. His name's in the title. So it's his movie, so to speak. But she starts so strong. As I said, I absolutely think one of the best interests of a character ever. And she ends a little more tropey than I think I would want, and definitely more tropey than Karen Allen wanted. But she's even said it's still an iconic role. I think she still rises above the tropes. A lot of stuff you're saying in the flying wing fight, a lot of stuff in the end, a lot, even her end beat with Indy. She's the one who maybe has the bigger picture more than him at it. So I definitely think it's one of those times that is very much made in a specific time. But even Karen Allen has said is over the years, the amount of people, the amount of young women, girls, anyone who's come up to her and said they've taken so much great inspiration from this line, from this character, and all the lines and all the beats and all the moments, and how she does rise above it in a way similar to Leia that still was in a time, right? But Carrie Fisher imbued so much of herself into that and grew into that took the role, but even I think continued to grow into more of Princess Leia in interviews and everything. And you watch Carrie Fisher promoting the film in 77 versus some of this stuff later on, some of the interviews in the early 80s where she's like, no, she is a self-rescuing princess. She's very much of the galaxy. There's so many wonderful things that I think Carrie grew with the role. We didn't get that chance with Marion Ravenwood. She doesn't come back till 2008. And I actually think that's unfortunate, though I actually don't mind that Indy's got a little bit of the Bond thing with going on. But she's such a powerful character. But I just do think it would be more balanced now, and you can't go back and change that. You can't go back and remake it. You can only go forward with the character.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to getting to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and looking at that. And I feel like it seems so far from the trailers of Dial of Destiny that it is about Indiana Jones' legacy and the legacy of these films in lots of ways. And I think it is important that there's a new character that is there and prominent. But I really agree with and echo everything you said about Marion. I loved this film. We spent over 2 hours talking about how great it is. Lucas is a hugely important part of my understanding of art, of the world, and inspiration. Spielberg is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, but I think it's also good and healthy to say, well, but they're also they're fallible, they're human, right? And I believe I was reading that it was Marshall Lucas who suggested that ending with Marion, of like, Marion needs some resolution of she got what she wanted, that she wanted this relationship back, that she saw who he really was or could become and wanted this relationship. And it does give this great completion to some of the themes and doesn't leave Marion out in the cold at the end of the film. But I agree with you that it is very similar to Leia, of hugely powerful, the charm, the wit, the amount of action that the character does get to do, and how she comes to life when she's got the frying pan. She's going for the knife. She's got the machine gun. She's not backing down. Is extremely powerful. But yes, also you can look at it and go, but if the film was made today, like we've said about Star Wars, if the film was made today, when Leia comforts Luke about losing Ben, there'd maybe be an acknowledgement that this is a strength that she is sharing, to say, I lost my entire planet, but I will bury that and I'll be there for you. We can give it that reading. But I think if it was made in a modern way, the film would make that reading explicit to give weight to that choice. And that's just like one example of agreeing with you about these characters being hugely influential, iconic, important, but also still of their time.
Yeah. And it's okay to be of your time. It's important to not stay in your time.
Yeah, they were steps forward, but the journey was not and is not done. I think for me, and I think with the age thing in particular, for me, I think there are moments in Indiana Jones, there are moments in Star Wars where what is thrilling, vital, important, interesting about the stories of the past, of films of the past, gets updated and brought into this, what was the present in 1981 when the film came out. And sometimes they take some baggage with them. And I feel like this sort of like, this is classic romance, tough guy, banter of, I never meant to hurt you. I was a child. I was in love. It was wrong. And you knew it. You knew what you were doing. That is definitely pulling from the past. But what are you pulling up from the past with it? And like we talked about a lot, I think it does have meaning. I think it does have relevance. I think that we are meant to question Indy's morality in this. But you pair that also with Lucas saying we want him to be a role model. I think it is hard that we have gone, in my opinion, in culture from just acknowledging that there are awful things that men do. And I grew up with the kind of shrug of like, yeah, you'd hear in the news or just in life, like, yep, that 71-year-old married a 22-year-old. There's that sort of agreement of like, well, that's not right, but men are going to do it, right? Yep. And I think we have evolved to the point of like going of saying this is actually that age difference does really make a difference. It is something that needs to be examined and taken seriously. And I think that the line that stabs for me is, you knew what you were doing. Is difficult, because I think that is something that is now rightfully being thoroughly examined of. We have power imbalances, and that's a hand wavy way to avoid having that difficult and important conversation to say, you know what you're doing.
You're sure. Yeah. Boys will be boys. Yeah.
Boys will be boys. Yeah. And again, like I said, I wrestle with it. I'm not condemning the film and saying it shouldn't be watched by any means.
Yeah.
Everything is an artifact of its time. And I do think it has, I can embrace it more by going, Indy's wrong, in my opinion. And this is a part of the arc of his character.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Much smaller thing. And it also is just the march of progress in high resolution. There's some pretty bad makeup on one of the antagonists in Marion's bar. That's much more glaringly clear in high resolution.
Yeah. Which one? Because Pat Roach is in that scene too. But but there's some.
Don't think it's Pat Roach. I don't know who it is, but it's like it's
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But that's all. That's just like a whole thing. I finally got the James Bond movies on Blu-ray, and all of those sequences for the Bond intros, particularly through the 60s, 70s, early 80s, were always like they were titillating because of all of the silhouettes and the shadows and all this, and like that's that in high resolution that's just a nipple party that would have never been allowed in the cinema without a different rating. And it is it's just to me it is really fascinating to watch this. Like, we're going to make everything as high resolution as possible until it actually sometimes changes the film a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
That's funny.
Just a little bit.
That's funny. Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we've done it. We've looked at one of the greatest films of all time, but beyond that, it's just one of my favorite films of all time, and that's more important to me, you, and our conversation. This film means so much. And this has been fun going through it, and really fun to sit down and watch it with a different eye.
It really was, and I'm so excited to get into the other films. Temple of Doom, so complex and weird. Last Crusade, in its relationship directly to this film. So excited. One final thing that I did want to mention is a thing that really hit me this time with all these themes of light and shadow and Indy's choices. I was really affected by the map room scene. I've always loved it, but the amount this action adventure movie slows down to really celebrate the reverence. This is an image of light, and it's thrilling. It's solving a puzzle. It's scratching an itch. It's Indy getting what he truly wants, which is knowledge. But it slows down and it takes time to show not just like the joy of an itch scratched, but reverence on Indy's face.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the ingredients. We talked about comedy, action, examination of morality, charm, and all that. But the film slows down for pure reverence a couple of times. And that map room scene is one of the things that I think really elevates the film.
You took the words out of my fumbling brain. The fact that this fast-paced movie that's a lesson on how to tell story at this pace absolutely slows down. It's a beautiful sequence, and one that was always mesmerizing to me as a kid, and I think has more meaning now, especially when you see, the markings and everything, the Nazis not getting there. They're so far off and everything, all those kind of things, to see it and to actually wait for the illumination. It's wonderful.
Yeah, a testament to knowledge as well. So great stuff there. We want to close, as always, with a fun question to wrap up. So, Ken, if you could be good with a whip or have a pet monkey that spied on people, which would you choose?
I do love little monkeys. So my going through the primates at the zoo is one of my favorite adventures. But I have a couple friends in my life who are great with whips. One of them's a stuntman. I used to manage in pro wrestling. And it's the coolest thing ever. I just, in my quest my whole life to finally one day be considered cool, I think a whip would help. And he would go to the park. It's my friend Jay. He would go to the park and just practice by himself. So I've seen some footage of it. And then like people would call the police on him. People didn't know what to do with it. It was just a man in the park with a whip. He's like, I'm just practicing. And he was so good with it. So I'd take the whip.
Yeah. All right. Throw me the arrow, throw me the whip. You say, yeah, the whip. Well, this is a perfect division because I'd take the monkey by a lot. It would make me feel cool to be an absolute master with a whip. If I could use it the way Indiana Jones does to, get the remote from across the room and not have to get off the couch. Amazing. Yes. Feels so cool. Oh, but the monkey. My monkey wouldn't be a Nazi monkey. My monkey would be a friendly monkey. And I love how attuned the monkey is with the handler and the way that they were able to communicate. This is the way I thought about using the monkey, Ken. We've just been in this position as we were at the hotel bars for the Star Wars Celebration convention, traveling other places where like by getting the drink at the bar, you are perhaps sacrificing the seat that is available at the bar. And there's always that tension of like, do we grab the seat or then go up to the bar? Do we try to, I would always, anytime I walked into a crowded bar, I would simply go to the bar and send the monkey to save me a seat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Major life problem solved.
Solved by the monkey. But a whip could do the same thing.
True. Somebody else tries to take the seat while you're at the bar and whoosh. With the power of a jet engine. All right, Ken, do you want to take us home?
Yes. Hey, for those listening on Patreon right now, in the moment, leading up to Dial of Destiny, thank you so much for the support, for making shows like this possible, and for allowing us to take this indie-like adventure into unfamiliar territory for Force Center. We're a Star Wars podcast. We have a lot of fun talking about the things that mean just as much to us. And for those listening later, we're the Force Center podcast feed. You can find us on Twitter at Force Center Pod. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube as well. And you can also get the podcast on a lot of different spots like Acast, iHeartRadio, and more. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/Force Center. And who knows, maybe by this time we'll have some Indiana Jones related Force Center merch we can put out there as well. Me in a park with a whip, just a shot on a shirt. You can support us directly and make shows like this possible. There's other things we want to talk about too at patreon.com/Force Center. Follow me at Ken Napzok or go to my website, kennapzok.com. Joseph, where can they follow you?
They can find me, you listening, can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Maybe I'll be on Spoutable soon. Who knows? But you can find me by looking for the username at Joseph Scrimshaw. More TikToks and YouTube videos coming of not unboxing. More comedy and short film coming to my YouTube channel soon. And I hope to be not unboxing an Indiana Jones action figure soon. It's like no piece of plastic I've ever gone after before.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know what? This podcast is kind of like an artifact in an Indiana Jones movie. Right now, it has a lot of value. Value this podcast as it is. It's a Patreon only. But we're gonna release it a lot later down the line publicly, and maybe it will have more value and Belloc will like it. But hopefully Indy will be there to get it before he does. That's it. We'll see you next time here on Force Center.